All right, meet Maggie. This is a model who often poses for us in our life drawing groups, and so ultimately, during our life drawing groups, we've kind of got poor lighting, so lighting changes throughout the night, and the model moves and changes, and light changes and everything. So I wanted to do a 3-hour study of basically trying to accomplish the same thing, doing a pose for a figure, and then ultimately doing that in sync with the same time limit, but this way I can kind of work off a photo reference. And so with this, I basically start off with simple oil paints, Caucasian, I believe is the color. I don't think they make it anymore. I think it's now like a peach or something like that. And I paint the highlights and I paint the shadows. And when I'm painting this is a ampersand panel, and so the paint, I can't put real thick paint on it because it just slides right off. So I'm kind of doing a wash to put over it. I'm using green to contrast the blue, and as I paint, I'm just kind of trying to push a lot more of the elements of light and dark. As you can tell, I'm just building up on this. The surface is really slick and really smooth. So until that paint actually starts holding off and drying a little bit, I can't put a lot of paint down. And so as I go, you can see that I'm just ultimately kind of building up blocks with little bits of different color. I'm using mainly my sepias, and I'm using some whites with some of this peach flavor, and ultimately a little bit of red and some blue. So I'm trying to keep the palette real kind of quiet and muted, and so I'm ultimately using just these base colors. Now with the blue and the sepias, you mix together, and that's what I'm using for blacks. Ultimately it's a nice dark flavor, and I can actually get some decent kind of tonal values out of it. I'm mainly using one brush. I'm going back and forth and adding just kind of tonal patterns to it. And as I look at it after it's done, there are some discrepancies, like the head doesn't feel like it's turned back as much, and the lips don't feel in the right spot. So some of this stuff I keep working over and over just to kind of blend in the areas. And you'll notice that as I go, I'm getting a little bit thicker paint, and I'm using less medium to kind of fill in the areas. Now, when I'm doing this, one of the biggest struggles I have is always trying to keep that light and dark kind of separated. I always feel like I get, I start off with like really decent colors, and then as I go, like it either gets a little bit muddier, or it's more of a struggle with the kind of variation of color, if that makes sense. The value doesn't look right or something along those lines. So my goal was to really kind of push that. I added a little bit more red into the cheeks, and then now I'm starting to paint in more of the shadows and stuff like that. So I'm building up more of the shadows. I always work on my paintings like I do my drawings, and try and push the values in different paths. So like I'll go dark, and then I'll try and reinforce the light, and I'll go dark and I'll try and reinforce the light. So as I'm working on this, the big thing that I'm kind of pushing is much more of the subtle shadows and stuff like that. So I'm really kind of pushing that aspect. And within 3 hours I get the basics of the face down, but there are some struggles. I have the nose needs some tweaking. The lips kind of are constantly being adjusted and things like that. So again, these are things that I can work on. I wasn't really trying to force. It's always a balance between working with the paint and then trying to get everything looking like that particular person. So as you can see, I'm just kind of painting in highlights and trying to get that nose upturned like she has it, and it's not quite right, but it's a pretty good likeness. And you'll notice I use the fan brush, and I'm trying to use that to blend. one of a problem I have with the fan brush is ultimately it's really big, so I either need to use something a little bit different, or I need to find a smaller fan brush. Basically going in and pushing in more highlights. I wish the blue was a little deeper. In the photo that I took, the lighting was kind of muting her hair, so I tried to really push that in there a little bit more. I'm trying to basically put more of a halo around it so that her face pops out a little bit. And these panels are great. I love working on the panels. They're nice and smooth, but the initial process that I have with them always has a struggle to put paint on. So again, here I'm working on the septum, around the nose and stuff like that, trying to get that, better looking. And then I'm just adding those real subtle highlights, like the tip of her nose, where her lips are coming in, and I'm kind of pushing that around. And again, I'm just trying to push a little bit more of the elements of the highlights and things like that, and trying to blend things together. So I think overall this was a really successful piece for me, just to try for 3 hours and kind of putz with at home. And I think it turned out pretty well. Again, when I'm painting, it's always choices between that accuracy and then the paint and fighting it. Especially being an 8x10, I'm struggling with those kind of little tidbits. I'm working with basically a nib brush, 020. I got a pack of 100 of them from. And this is pretty much it. I'm putting highlights in, and then after that, I'm pretty much done. Let me know if you like this, and if you want to see more. Thanks much.